Are your students really annotating, or is it just a highlighter party? All the colors of the highlighters and sticky notes, but not a whole lot of true annotation. Maybe your student annotations look like this, where your students want to highlight everything, which is pretty much like highlighting nothing. Or this, or maybe even this. If your students are doing more coloring than true annotating, it's time to give them some structure and skills. But how do you teach students to annotate? Let's look at some easy ways to do that. Before you even hand out a single highlighter, make sure your students understand the why of annotation. Why are they doing this? Why is it important, and how is it going to help them? We know that annotation will improve their comprehension skills, help them make text connections, and give them reference points that they can use to discuss literature so that evidence is easier to find when they're doing their literary analysis skills. What comes next then? You want to teach your students what to highlight by giving them guidance, and start by giving their reading and annotation a purpose. What are they looking for? Characters, conflict, plot points? A great way to start this is at the beginning of a chapter or a text, give your students a purpose. Once they have practiced with you and you've helped them set the purpose, then they'll be better able to tackle the next text on their own. You'll want to get them used to annotating independently. So what should their annotations be about? You want them to be looking for things like character names, important events, themes, questions, reactions they have to a text, questions they have to a section of the text and how it relates to another section, inferencing. I have some free bookmarks that you can use with your students that give you a whole list of things they can be looking for as they're annotating, and you'll find the link to the free item in the notes below. You also may want your students to use symbols or shorthand as they're annotating. And if you do that, you want to make sure your students know exactly what those symbols mean. Symbols and shorthand work really well with margin notes. So students can go back and determine what they meant when they put a question mark there, what exactly the exclamation point meant. So using symbols is good with the margin notes. Your students know why they're annotating and what they're looking for as they read. So now, how do you actually want them to annotate? You want to determine the best method of annotating for you and your students. It might be highlighter, pencil, pen, marker, sticky notes. If they can't write in the text, of course, they're going to have to use an alternative like sticky notes. If they can write in the text, a highlighter with margin notes is really super helpful because highlighting will show them what's important, but going back to that text, margin notes are really helpful so the students know why they highlighted that particular text. Where should their notes actually go? End pages and margins and space before and after chapters are great places for students to add notes to their text. End pages at the beginning of a novel or the beginning of a chapter are perfect for students to write down characters, setting, little descriptors so that they can help remember who the different characters are. Sometimes they can even write a summary of a chapter at the beginning or the end of it to help them remember what happened in that chapter. Also, rather than highlighting a long piece of important text, brackets are really helpful so students can go back and look at the items in the bracket that they thought were important. Making a notation of what's in the bracket also very important to help speed up them finding different texts and what they meant. I like to circle new vocabulary words and phrases because then that stands out from the rest of annotations. You also could have your students annotate with a pen or a pencil or a marker and then have them highlight vocabulary words so that they pop out, so that when students are going back looking for vocabulary words in a text, that they're easier to find. Let's talk about using sticky notes. So if you can't write in the book, sticky notes are the way to go. However, sticky notes really have to be used judiciously. And you've probably seen a student with sticky notes everywhere in the book and it's just a whole big sticky note collection. It can be really distracting. Most sticky notes can have multiple notes written on them. So rather than using a note for every single important item or flags for everything, writing several notes on one sticky note is going to be more effective, because thinking of the end result of how the students are going to use those sticky notes. The other nice thing about a sticky note is they can be pulled off the page and put on a writer's notebook or on a journal or on a piece of paper where the students are going to be writing some kind of a paper response, and they're a little bit more flexible and easier to use. You can also use a note taker, and these are super easy and simple to use, and they don't require any sticky. Just take a piece of loose leaf paper and fold it into quarters long ways, and you can get 8 chapters out of a single piece of paper, front and back, and students can write notes on it, and then they can use it as a bookmark. So it's super easy. And one of the best things about it is you can also collect it, and it can be a formative assessment. You can make sure your students are picking up on the important things, and it gives some accountability for students taking notes as they're reading. Now we've got them annotating. They've annotated a text. What are they going to do with that information? How are they going to use it? You want your students to know that their annotations are valuable, and it's not just an exercise in marking up a book. So be sure to use those annotations. So students can write a reflection. They can use their annotations to talk about something in book club or literature circles. They can use it for a book talk. They could even just start collecting a list of text evidence to support a character or a conflict or elements of a plot. What could possibly go wrong with this? Well, your students might be annotating too much or too little. So you can solve this with a lot of modeling. If you have a document camera, that's really important way to model the annotations. You can have students share their annotations with each other and work on them with a partner. That also helps. Talking through, working through annotations will help students be a little bit more comfortable with this process. So I've made a quick video showing me just annotating a few pages in the Outsiders. And you can see that I circle new vocabulary words as I come to them. I'm underlining important plot points and bracketing longer pieces of text. And I've included margin notes so that I know what's happening. So when I go back to trying to find something within a text, I can find it easily because I have those margin notes. What are your next steps? Well, I want you to click on the links below. You're going to find that free bookmark, and you're also going to find some other helpful resources that will get you started teaching annotation with your students. But the most important tip I have is just to dive in. Remember, this is a complex skill. It requires a lot of practice, and annotation is going to be different with every type of text that you use: fiction, nonfiction, poetry, all different types of texts, which are going to require all different types of annotation. So be sure you're teaching this multiple times. It's not a one and done lesson. It's something that your students will be working on all year long, and you're going to be really giving them some great skills for diving in and digging into texts in a meaningful way, and not just reading and skimming through, but really working with the text. If you need a little more help, in the links below, you'll find this resource, which will just take your students through annotation and help you get started teaching it with practice, and give you some additional text that you can use as your students are practicing this skill. Thanks for joining me today. I loved visiting with you. I'd love you to subscribe to my teeny tiny YouTube channel, but even more, I'd love to hear how annotating is going for you and your students, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.